program with our speaker is Mike Skinner. I don't know where Mike is even at. All right. I am giving Mike's intro.
It's like the
Oz. Okay. Mike is a practicing engineer, but his passion is researching and sharing Polynesian pop culture stories. He is a Tiki event veteran, having presented at popular symposiums across the country, including Tropical Space Age Architecture, which we've had here at Docomomo, The Luck of Paradise, Wild West Tiki, SeaWorld San Diego's Exotic Masterpiece, Waltah Clarke and the World of Aloha Fashion, AHOY, Exploring Mid-Century Nautical Tiki, Tropical Space Age Design, The Look of Paradise, and Tiki After Dark, the erotic, not the exotic, but the erotic side of Exotica. So,
if you didn't get it, that one's entertaining. If that's get a chance to see that one. I sat with a couple of times and I've seen two versions and both of them are as good.
So with that, I'll turn the floor over to Mike and his program called Tiki Time Mid-Century Polynesian Pop.
You can minimize Clarke.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you want to minimize the screens?
Josh, will you turn those two lamps off, please? Just give it easy. Tiki is all about eye candy. So
the mood lighting.
We're going to do everything we can to thank you. I am a self-proclaimed Tiki snob. I am not a coffee snob, clearly. I drink McDonald's dollar coffee. I'm not a foodie. But Tiki, I am a self-proclaimed Tiki snob. What does that mean? Party City Tikis disgust me. And so I'm going to show you what real Tiki is. And when I talk about Tiki, I'm not talking about the real cultural heritage of the South Pacific. I'm talking about Walt Disney's version, mainland United States interpretation of what we thought Tiki was and how it exploded. And this is my favorite topic to talk about. Has anybody in it? Monty, I know you've seen shows before. Kimber, has anybody else seen the show? Josh, you did. So a couple years ago, I did a presentation for Docomomo, I think it was in 2021, about Tiki architecture. And that's online, that's on YouTube. That recording came from this event. So if you're interested in seeing that, I'll be in Orlando, Florida in about 3 weeks. There's a brand new Tiki event down there called Tiki A Go-Go. And they invited me to come down there and present 2 shows. So I'll be doing a show about Tiki architecture. And then I'm doing a show specifically about Walt Disney. And it's called Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Tiki. And Disney, specifically Disney. So the thing that's interesting about Tiki is people are drawn to it for so many different reasons. I specifically like the architecture, but some people are into it for craft cocktails. Some people are into it for music. Some people are into it for vintage Aloha fashion. Some people are into it for artwork. They're artists. So it really is a wide spectrum, and it draws a whole lot of creative people into this world of Tiki. The concept of Tiki and Polynesian pop culture coming back to the United States started in World War II. And it started with these gentlemen right here. The servicemen that were serving in the South Pacific Theater, that were fighting in the South Pacific Theater. They were coming from places like Oswego, Kansas, and Wichita, and Omaha. They're having these grand adventures and coming back to the United States and having lived or spent time in Moorea or Bali or Guam. The man up here at the top, this is the Moana Surf Rider Hotel. That's Diamond Head. That's Seaman First Class, James S. Case, and that's my grandfather. He made it back from World War II. The other pilot over there, that's Major Harvey Hinkle. His nickname was Heine. Major Harvey Heine Hinkle. And he was a badass. He was a Marine. So you didn't tease him. He was also my grandfather. That's my mom's grandfather and my dad's grandfather. So they both fought in the South Pacific Theater, and they came back. They both came back from World War II, but it's these servicemen that brought back these experiences being in the South Pacific, and that was the genesis and the beginning of tiki culture. My grandfather, the one that was in the United States Navy, this was the ship that he served on board. This is the USS Warhawk. It was a supply ship. It didn't fight, but they supplied troops, transport, cargo, munitions, tanks, airplanes, everything. They sailed around the South Pacific delivering that stuff. They were based out of Pearl Harbor. My grandfather on the ship, he was the ship's clerk. So think MASH, think Radar O'Reilly. He was the clerk for the camp. That was what he did for the ship. He was the clerk for the ship. So he was the most popular man on board once a week, passing out mail and paychecks when they would come into port in Waikiki, and they go to Chinatown, which was the raunchy part of Honolulu at the time.
Still is.
It still is. Yes, it is. I was there last week, or 2 weeks ago. My wife and I were in Honolulu. So James Michener, he was a captain in the United States Navy. He served time in the South Pacific, and when he came back, he wrote a book called Tales of the South Pacific, talking about his time serving in the South Pacific. It won a Pulitzer Prize. It became a national bestseller. It got translated into a musical. Rodgers and Hammerstein translated the book into the musical South Pacific. At this time, and then it became a movie. Went from Broadway to become a movie. At this point, the horrors of war were starting to fade away. And it was just the romanticized fantasy of the South Pacific that was being embellished. And the island of Bali, that is the star of the movie, doesn't even really exist. There is no island called Bali in Tahiti, where the movie is set. It's fictitious. Everything about this is fictitious. So, like I said, the horrors of war have faded away. It's just become romanticized. It's become embellished. And here we go. The world of tiki and tiki pop culture is taking off. It really started with this man right here. This is Don Beach. His name when he started was Ernest Beaumont Gant. He legally changed his name to Don Beach. And he opened his restaurants, Don the Beachcomber. The first one being in 1933 in Hollywood. He was a rum runner. It was the days of Prohibition. And he was ready to open the store in Hollywood when Prohibition was repealed. This was the Hollywood location. This was the very beginning of tiki culture. At his location there. And what's interesting is there are no tikis in this picture. This is what we call a bamboo bar. The concept of bringing tikis didn't come back until after World War II. So everything pre-World War II is just these tropical bamboo bars. Don was a hell of an inventor, entrepreneur. He created all of the tiki cocktails that exist in the world today. He was the first craft cocktail creator, but he was also a hell of a businessman and had a hell of an imagination. On that back window that you see out there, as the evening would start to wind down and his patrons were ready to get up and leave, he would go outside and run a garden hose up there and it looked like it was raining. So people would end up staying there and have another drink until the rain stopped. And it was this little sham of like, oh, tropical rainstorm. And he was out there with a garden hose just to sell a couple more drinks. That wasn't his only shtick. His other shtick was right here in the front of the store. That's a custom bamboo case, and those are chopsticks. So if you were a celebrity in Hollywood at the time, Clark Gable, Charlie Chaplin, etc., and you were a regular at Don the Beachcomber, you got to keep your chopsticks in those little bamboo racks. And then they had a glass door on it. So this gal right here from Omaha, Nebraska can say when she went home, I got to have a zombie next to Charlie Chaplin's chopsticks. That's a big deal in 1940, right? That would you see in Hollywood. I saw John Wayne's chopsticks at Don the Beachcomber. So that was his gimmick, and he incorporated that into several of his other restaurants. His architecture became much more exaggerated after he left the company. His wife took over control of the company, and Don moved to Waikiki in 1946, and he never came back to the mainland. And so he had control of his name, Don the Beachcomber, in Hawaii, but he did not have control of his name. Don the Beachcomber and all the restaurants that were in California. His wife, Sonny's son, did. But they had some interesting architecture. This was Corona del Mar, just south of Newport Beach in California, with this exotic roadside architecture. So you can imagine driving down PCH, Pacific Coast Highway, and seeing that as a young kid in the back seat of the station wagon, thinking, I got to go back to this place. That was complete craziness. This is also Don the Beachcomber. This was in Marina del Rey, which is just north of Los Angeles International Airport, their location there. And these are what we affectionately refer to as the UFO style restaurant. They're round with these funky look. And when you first look at that, like, there's no way, what's Polynesian about that? What is that? But if you look at traditional Samoan architecture, what they call a fale, they're round. And I talk about that in our architecture presentation. But here's another one. This is Don the Beachcomber in Dallas, with more of that UFO architecture. So you have tikis out front. Notice how different this is than the Hollywood location, right? It was all bamboo. Here we're starting to see tikis. So we've got tikis out front. You walk across the bridge. There's a lava rock waterfall inside, and this is what you stepped into. This is in Dallas, Texas. The location that's no longer there, with the peacock chairs and the bamboo fencing that runs throughout the restaurant. This is what exploded across the country, and we had these everywhere. Not just Don the Beachcomber, but this high quality tiki bars, several here in Denver that we'll talk about here at the end of the show. Now, Don's main competitor was this man right here. This is Victor Bergeron, who kept his name legal as Vic Bergeron, but he became Trader Vic. And Vic was a foodie. So he created his restaurants that revolved around food to sell drinks, where Don was just the opposite. Don was a craft cocktail. The food was there to support the cocktails. So they really complemented each other. Vic was a much more astute businessman, and his restaurants were much more financially viable, and there were more Trader Vics than there were Don Beachcomber. Vic was great at his job and what he did. But he was also a storyteller. And when he was a kid, he had one of his legs amputated at his knee down, and he had a wooden leg. And he would like to tell everybody that he lost it in a shark attack. And, it adds to his story. He'd be sitting around the bar and, tiger shark, off the coast of Hawaii took a bite out of my leg. He'd also be known to be sitting at his bar, and he would take an ice pick, and he would jab it into his leg through his pants and freak somebody out. And before they knew it was a wooden leg. So he was a jokester. But Vic was, his restaurants were about the food. This was the Statler Hotel, Vic associated with the Hilton chain. This was 2 blocks away from the White House. The hotel is still there. Trader Vic's is long gone, but the Vic's was in the basement there at the Hilton. Look at those big, giant Easter Island moai there at the front entrance. Those were carved in Sausalito, the Bay Area, San Francisco, and put on a rail car and railed all the way across to Barney West, carved those and railed them all the way to DC, and then they put them up there. So you can't just go to the Home Depot and buy stuff like that. So we had a carver in San Francisco, and that's where you went to buy him. That's where Vic was based out of, was San Francisco. But here we are back at the Hilton there in Washington D.C. It was Richard Nixon's favorite restaurant. There's Dick right there. That's Richard Nixon with his Secret Service agent. He would have meetings there 3 times a week. He'd say, let's forget our staff meeting. We're going to Vic's. And he had the back room, and he was a regular at Trader Vic's. He loved it. He was a tiki file, and he was there on a regular occasion. The third man that was really responsible for blowing this pop culture up is this man right here. This is Stephen Crane. And, excuse me, Stephen Crane was a failed Hollywood actor. He was married to Lana Turner at one point, and then he became a restaurateur. That's where he became successful, is he opened up his chain of Cone Tiki restaurants. Now, Stephen Crane affiliated himself with the Sheraton. So Vic was in Hilton. Tikis were in the Sheraton. But his very first restaurant, this is 1955, this is in Beverly Hills. It was called the Luau. And you'll notice this is a tiki restaurant because the fence posts are made out of tikis. And there are tikis all throughout. You have this beautiful big waterfall in the back there that would spill down into various levels and have streams that would run through the restaurant. That was kind of a hallmark of Stephen Crane and what he would do. The Luau was also famous for the hookers that worked there. And so they were pretty high-end hookers, and Steve knew about them. And he let them work the bar. He wouldn't let them work the restaurant, but he would let them work the bar because it added a flair of character to his Luau restaurant in Beverly Hills. This is Cleveland, Ohio. For the thing, now they stole the idea of Don, running the rain off of the tin roof, because you'll notice right here at the top, there's a tin roof here, and then there's a moat right down here. And so they had the simulated rainstorm that ran regularly through the restaurant there. Hallmark of those half moon green vinyl booths, and you would find those in almost all of the Tiki restaurants. Like I said, this is Cleveland, this is Portland. So over the top, right? The hallmark of the good tiki bar is you can't see it all the first time. Every time you go back, you find something new that you hadn't seen before. It's just layer upon layer upon layer of junk, right? Beloved junk. So when I say I am a self-proclaimed tiki snob, this is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Party City tikis with the garish pink and white and yellow and blue colors. That's crap tiki. This is tiki to me. This is hardcore tiki. Now, he also, Marriott didn't want to be left out in the cold. So they hired, and they worked with the firm that you all know and love dear to your heart, Arment & Davis, out of California. So they Marriott hired Arment & Davis to design all of their tiki bars, and they became the Kona Kai. So Sheraton had a chain, Hilton had a chain, now Marriott has a chain. And so this is Arment & Davis's first tiki bar that they did for, this was in Philadelphia, for Marriott, where their corporate headquarters are. That's the main entrance to the dining room. Now, Arment & Davis, they were a full service design firm. They designed the graphics for the cocktail napkins. They designed the architecture for the interior of the buildings. They designed the graphics for the menus. They designed the carvings of the tikis. They did everything. It was full service. From the outside, this is the entrance, the Marriott. You can see Ariat on the top over there, but this was the side entrance. If you didn't go in through the lobby, you came in through the parking lot with that big frigate bird up on the top. And those beautiful petroglyphs on the inside of the A-frame leading in with the breeze block. But at night, it really comes to life with the gas torches and that frigate bird. Now, that frigate bird, you see that in a lot of tiki restaurants at the time. It's a symbol that comes from the island of Tahiti. And in Tahiti, the frigate bird is a symbol of longevity, life, health, prosperity, a whole lot of things. So you'll see a lot of Tahitians have a stylized tattoo of a frigate bird. So if you see a bird that's not a seagull, but it looks a little different, that's probably a frigate. And so there's another version of a frigate. This was Aloha Joe's in Palm Springs. That was right off of South Canyon Boulevard, right down by the Caliente Tropics Hotel. But they had that beautiful giant frigate bird, and that bird now it still exists, and it's in Max's South Sea Hideaway in Michigan. The owner of that location salvaged a bunch of this stuff, and it's really kind of a museum there, so you can still go and find that there. But Palm Springs. So let's step inside Palm Springs, mid-century Palm Springs, and here's a couple ordering an orchid bowl with a hideously ugly tiki mug down here. But there's the shared orchid bowl, and the cocktail waitress comes to deliver it. But the focus is not the cocktails here. The focus is the cocktail waitress. And I cropped the picture there for a reason, because that's what she really looks like, right? Look at that hat that she's wearing. Over the top, over the top. That's what they wore at Aloha Joe's. And they just thought, if one level is good, 2 levels is better, let's go 3, right? And let's go over the top. Tiki is over the top, right? So let's go back up the road to LA. This is also in Beverly Hills. This is the Islander restaurant on La Cienega Boulevard, known as Restaurant Row. Lowry's Prime Rib was right down the road. The Gay 90s was right down the road. The Islander had this big, beautiful soaring A-frame. And when I very first saw this postcard, I found this many, many years ago. The first thing that jumped out at me were those rickshaws that were parked in the bottom. And I said, really? They had rickshaw service in there? No, that was just a prop. That was a stage. No, it's not. Look at another postcard. So they actually provided rickshaw service up and down the street to go to another restaurant or just to take you to your car, which was at the street parking around the corner. But at night, you got the beautiful sign there that's lit up with the gas torches. To get into the restaurant, you actually entered on the 2nd story. So you wound your way up this ramp. You walked up this ramp, circled back around, and walked across a bridge to go into the restaurant. That's the, oh, there you go. That's a Life magazine photo of the taking a rickshaw ride in Beverly Hills. So that's the bridge that you would go across to go into the Islander in Beverly Hills. Beautiful mid-century vehicle in the back, outrigger canoes in the bottom, the lagoon, everything is there. Inside of the restaurant, we had this beautiful tiki and this woman, and this was in Life magazine. She's drinking a drink called a painkiller. It's a very common tiki drink. But Life magazine retitled it The Husband Killer for this picture because it's very Hitchcock-esque, right? Tiki noir in this picture. So she's drinking the husband killer with that giant tiki. So let's stay in the bar at the Islander there for a minute. They had a monkey. They had this little capuchin monkey. See him right there in front of the lady? That would run up and down the bar, that lived there. And when you were sitting at the bar, you just play with it. You know, forget health code standards, but you could feed it. You could have it take a puff of your cigarette. You know that monkey was an alcoholic, right? You know, you're a little bitch of a monkey, I'm sure. It became nasty. But when you look at these pictures, it's kind of fun to tell the story. Okay, but let's put it in perspective. When I look at the cocktail that she's drinking, I can go back and pull the menu from the Islander, which I have a copy of, and I know exactly what she's drinking because most cocktails were served in their own unique mugs. So that mug right there is called the Cobra Fang. And it's just a cylinder with a cobra that wraps around it, and you can see that's what she's enjoying there. Okay, so it puts a little perspective and a little story to the photograph now. It's not just a lady with a monkey. We know where she is, and we know what she's drinking. We're still there. Let's look at the monkey now. There's the monkey taking a sip. And this lady, again, pull out the menu. Let's see what she's drinking. She's drinking a Vicious Virgin because of the cocktail. And if you look on the back wall, there's the husband killer tiki way in the back there. See it there? That's where the lady took her photograph. So it's fun to put these pictures in context. Now, when we talk about roadside architecture, tiki roadside architecture, you can find it from coast to coast. Every city had some. This was in Phoenix, a little bit of Waikiki in the heart of Phoenix. This was the Cone Tiki Hotel. Just a 2-story, 3-story, basically holiday, not even a holiday, a Motel 6. And they put this exotic architecture up front, took these 2 A-frames, kind of turned them sideways, stuck them together. And this was off of Van Buren Avenue, right across the street from the airport. So when you came into Phoenix, driving down Van Buren on your way to Scottsdale, you drove right by this thing. Here's another one. This is the Tahitian village in Downey, California. And it had a coffee shop. It had a barber shop. It had a beauty salon. It had a restaurant. It had a bar. It had dancing. And it also had a hotel. And it was right around the corner from Lockheed Martin. So most of the aerospace engineers that were traveling in town for doing contract work were staying here. So you know they're having some hardcore astronaut parties at the Tahitian village with that sorry A-frame that came out over the thing. Now I mentioned when we started, there's a whole bunch of different elements to Tiki. We've been talking about architecture, music. This is how I got started in Tiki. The year 1983. There used to be a Target on West Colfax, right over by Westland. Some of you remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Way in the back there. Yeah. So my mom and I were walking through that Target in 1983. I'm in high school, back when Target still had a music department, right? And they had a bargain bin with cassette tapes. And my mom's looking through the cassette tapes, and she pulls this tape out of Ferrani and Teicher. And she goes, oh, Quiet Village. I remember that song. My parents used to listen to that. And I said, Mom, what are you talking about? And she said, Quiet Village. That's the song that Martin Denny did with all the bird calls in it and everything like that. Well, I bought it. It was like $1.99. And I took it home and I fell in love with it. 1983 in high school. My friends are listening to Van Halen, and I'm listening to Ferrani and Teicher. I'm not saying that too loud, right? I'm gonna get my ass kicked in high school if I do that. But the world of Exotica music was exploded, and it added the soundtrack to these restaurants and these home bars that we're going to look at here in a few minutes. Martin Denny and Les Baxter and Arthur Lyman, and the list goes on and on and on and on. I have a good friend. He goes by his tiki name as Kaiwaza, and he lives in Honolulu, and his Hawaiian record collection is about 2,700 records right now. And he's digitizing every single one of them and putting them on his online radio station, saving them and preserving them. So that's his kink, is Exotica music. But it's fun to explore the world of Tiki music. We also have the World of Tiki roadside attractions. Here we are in San Diego in 1966 when SeaWorld opened with this beautiful soaring A-frame. When SeaWorld first opened, the architect that designed all of the structures in SeaWorld were South Seas and Polynesian. That fell away in the 70s and the 80s when Anheuser-Busch bought SeaWorld. They don't own it anymore, but when they did, they went through and whitewashed everything. Literally, became white buildings with blue stripes on them. So they lost all of their exotic Tiki architecture. But for about 20 years, SeaWorld was the place to go in Southern California if you were looking for exotic architecture. How about popping over to the East Coast and go to St. Petersburg, Florida? They had Tiki Gardens. These were just Frank Byers and his wife, just mom and pop. And they had a big piece of plot of land that had a bunch of gardens on it. They made some concrete tikis and they started selling tickets. And they turned into
this one makes me sad because it's now a parking lot.
Yeah, it's a parking
in Indian
lot.
Rocks Beach, and it's 10 minutes from our house.
Right around the corner. Yep.
What did it cost? 90s, and it was supposed to be redeveloped back then, and they made it a parking lot, and it is still a parking lot with weeds growing in it, and it like breaks my heart. And across the street from it, where you go into Indian Rock Beach, they actually have a really cool mid-century like beach building where you have like the restrooms and stuff, so at least that still survives. But it breaks my heart that it's like there's like one remaining kind of sign, and it's just a parking lot.
Next month, when I go to Orlando to speak at that Tiki conference, John Bortles is giving an hour-long symposium specifically just about
Well, I'll see you when
Tiki
Tiki
gardens.
goes.
Yep.
I'll see you there.
Here they are. These are the cement version Tikis. Like, right, this is just a mod stylistic version of Tiki, right? There's no cultural appropriation here. This is just full-on fun, right? Backyard adornments. Aloha, y'all, from Tiki Gardens. I love that. It's very southern, right? But they had free-roaming peacocks. They had a Tiki torch lighting ceremony every evening. They throw some records on, and they turn it into a whole production. They took a little pontoon boat, put some plywood flats on it, and called it their Tiki pontoon boat, so you could float around their gardens on a Tiki tour. And this, I mean, so that's how cheesy this all was, but how wonderful it all was too, is how simple the concept was, and you could convert it into what we love. But the master really took over in 1963. And this is when Walt Disney opened his Enchanted Tiki Room at Disneyland. The Enchanted Tiki Room at Disneyland is and has been and will only be the only attraction ever that Disney has ever been involved with that actually has Walt Disney's name on it. Because Walt Disney built the Enchanted Tiki Room. Disneyland did not. He funded that out of his own pocket. He built it. He created the Imagineering department that did that. That's why when the Enchanted Tiki Room opened, it required its own individual ticket, and that money went straight to Walt because he put all his personal investment into this. After about 4 years, it started becoming very successful. He sold it back to Disneyland, and Disneyland bought it. But that's why it's called Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, because he personally paid for it. He hired all of his Imagineers to do the work. This opened in June of 1963, and it is the best remaining example of Polynesian pop culture that remains in the world, is to go and see Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. They've shortened the show. It used to be 17 minutes. People's ass can't take that much. You know, the TikTok society, they'll get up and walk out in the middle of the show now after about 3 minutes. So they shortened the show down to about 12 minutes now. They took a couple of numbers out, but they haven't reduced it any more than that. So if you want to experience what 1963 Polynesian pop culture was, here it is. Go to Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room at Disneyland. Hasn't changed. It's been cleaned. It's been updated. The animatronics have been updated in the birds, etc. But it's still there, the same as it was when it opened. There's Walt. You can see this was opening day. This was the press release the week before the official opening. You can tell just by his face how excited he is and how proud he was of this attraction. Nothing had ever been done like this before, ever. They created the whole concept of audio animatronics. And so if you go and watch it now and you see a bird, it had 5 movements. It could tilt its head left, it could tilt its head right, it could puff its chest in or out, and it could tilt its head up and down. Okay, pretty basic, pretty simple. But at the time, that was a monumental shift in what they could do with electronics. And it set the precedent for all theme parks moving forward. So it really is, it belongs in a museum, but Walt will famously said Disneyland will never be a museum. It'll always change. Unfortunately, the winds of change are blowing strong at Disney. And this is very taboo in Disney right now. Disney is very, very sensitive to cultural appropriation right now. And just last month, some of you that are in the tiki world may have seen that Shag, the artist Shag, created a tiki mug with these tikis from the Enchanted Tiki Room. He created it for Disney. Disney hired him to do it. He created the mug, sculpted it, handed it to them, and they said, we changed our mind. It's too culturally insensitive, we changed our mind. Shag has made that company millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars over the last 10 years. And they said, no, that's culturally insensitive. So where I'm going with all this is if you want to go to the Tiki Room, you better go sooner rather than later. I keep my ears open to hear what's going on with this, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's a year, 5, 3 or something, if it gets gutted and turned into a character meet and greet or a retail location or an expanded Dole Whip store. And the culture.
Country Bears, though, that's the other one that one's more risky than this one.
But if they said no to Shag, then the winds of change are blowing. So it's a little scary. All right, home architecture. This is Mesa, Arizona, suburb of Phoenix, 1956. Look at that beautiful wood shake shingle roof, right? You can't get that anymore. Insurance companies won't insure. Is that right, Alan? Can insurance companies won't insure this anymore?
The cedar shake anymore.
Okay.
You can't even have a roof that's 15 years old anymore. They'll.
How do we get back to this? Do they make concrete tiles that look like this, or do we just have to wish and dream?
Like
Do they look close to this, or are they?
Cement composition tiles.
Yeah, they don't do it, do they?
Right. Like I've seen houses in the Denver area with those roof lines with asphalt tiles on them, but it's not quite the same.
They do make structural tiles, and they do make some that are like slate. Like there's on Littleton Boulevard, we have one that they did a landmark on that was a 30s Jack Benedict building that they had like a custom made roof tile that looks like.
When I was a kid, I grew up in Anaheim, California, literally in the shadow of Disneyland. If I stood on the diving board of my grandparents' swimming pool, you could see the top of the Matterhorn from their backyard. And you know the Mark Twain, when it goes around the rivers of America and it blows that whistle, you could hear it at my grandparents' backyard. That's how close I grew up to Disneyland as a young kid. So Disneyland was kind of burned on my brain. But driving through every neighborhood in Orange County looked exactly like this, right? This style of home. My grandparents lived in a neighborhood like this. This was commonplace. This is what exploded post-war in Southern California. But this is, like I said, this is Mesa, Arizona. And it's got that Chinese modern style front door with the door handle right in the middle that we love. Now, this house still exists. Last time I was speaking at a Tiki conference in Arizona, I drove over there. Oh, I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. Here's another home bar. Those of you that have ever been to Portland, Oregon, there's an existing Tiki bar there called the Alibi. This is the owners of the Alibi. This is his home bar. Picture taken in 1971 with those orange vinyl stools sitting at the bar. Some ugly Whitco tikis. Whitco, you either love it or you hate it, or love to hate it. I guess I don't have a picture of that. Sorry, that's in the architecture show. But that house in Mesa, Arizona is still there. What has changed is where the garage, they've enclosed it so that half wall now goes all the way up to the top, and there's a garage door, so they've enclosed it. Clearly the landscaping has grown in. The roof line is still there, but it's new materials, but the house still stands. And in its beautiful glory. Tiki apartments. This is my very favorite subject when it comes to the world of Tiki. These were the Playa del Rey Polynesian Village, designed by Armit and Davis. Out of California, this was literally right next to LAX airport. So talk about a creature of the jet age. You could live in this Polynesian village while 747s were taking off to go to exotic places like Waikiki, right, where you're sitting on your balcony watching the jets leave from LAX. This was the landscaping inside the Polynesian village. Now, there's some very Tiki, or very Disney-esque kind of cartoony Tikis here, like this guy right here, and there's a guy hidden up here. They've got these gas jets that are bubbling up through the water and ignited through the thing. And if you look closely up on the patios, up on the second story there, all of the supports, here's one, here's one, here's one, they're all individually carved tikis, and they're all different. So when you lived there, if you moved into the apartment, you got automatic tikis on your patio. And this was just, $380 a month to live there in LA at the time, right? And so there's a better picture of the tikis that you got on the roof line. About 100 of those were saved and salvaged, and also you can find them also at Max's South Sea Hideaway in Michigan. They lined the wall down the hallway to the bathroom, but they're still there. That's what it looked like from the street. Apologize for the quality of the picture. That's the only picture I've ever found, and it was in a little tiny guidebook. The picture was about this big. So when you tried to blow it up, you lost all resolution. But this is Armit and Davis. If you were standing on the sidewalk across the street, it looked like Disneyland, right? This does not look like, who wants to live there? I do, right? I want to live there. That's a Tiki and all its goodness. So when we talk about the mom and pop restaurants, we've talked about those. There were a couple of restaurants that I refer to as Tiki temples. There were 3 of them, and they were a Tiki to the 10th power. This was one of them. This was the Kahiki in Columbus, Ohio. It closed in 2000. But it was one of those tiki temples. Why was it a tiki temple? Because it was outrageous, over the top. This was just the front door to get in. With the Moai Easter Island heads, they lit at night. They had fires that burned off the top there. And when you walked across the bridge into the main dining room, you had this 4-story Moai head on the back wall there. And that was the signature tiki for the Kahiki in Columbus, Ohio. And I love tiki bars that don't look tropical, right? When you find a tiki bar in Palm Springs, it just doesn't look right because it's in the desert. Or when you find a tiki bar in Canada or Columbus, Ohio that has snow on it, those are the best pictures. Of course, we expect to see palm trees on a tiki bar in Florida or Southern California, but when you step outside of that environment and you go to Las Vegas or something like this, it really puts tiki into context to show how popular it was, and everywhere you could find it. You just didn't have to be in a tropical environment. You can see the cocktail waitress at the very back of that picture. Just look at that for scale. She's standing right here. Just look how big just the fireplace opening is at the Kahiki there. So when you went into the Kahiki, you walked through the Hall of Waterfalls, and you had your choice of 4 bars in the restaurant. You could go to the Maui bar, you could go to the piano bar, you could go to the Outrigger bar, or you could go upstairs to the other cocktail bar. But this was the big main dining area that we saw. Here's the fireplace. They had some individual huts that lined the wall. They had bingo downstairs in the basement. They had a private room upstairs for the Lions Club or the Kiwanis upstairs. But this was a tiki temple. This was not just your mom and pop tiki bar. Unfortunately, as we see everything I'm talking about today, everything is gone. It was bought by Walgreens in 2000 and torn down. And some of this stuff was salvaged. Those big tikis out front, they were salvaged and they were donated to the Columbus Zoo. So they exist in some of their zoo exhibits. The fireplace was salvaged. It was bought by a collector in Vermont. They had to cut a hole in the roof to get the thing out of there. And they used that crane. They pulled it out. They loaded it on a flatbed truck, and they shipped it off to Vermont. This was back in 2000, and it's still sitting in the backyard in Vermont, and it's crumbled and falling apart, and it's not salvageable anymore. So they went to all this effort to save it, restore it, and it's not salvageable anymore. It's crumbled concrete at this point. Kiki. That's what's there today. Is Walgreens at the corner of Healthy and Happy, right? Is that what they say? Right? So that was our first tiki temple. It's gone. The Kahiki. Let's talk about Denver. We've been talking about all this stuff. We had awesome tiki in Denver. We had a lot of tiki in Denver. This is one of my favorite places. This was the Tiki Kai. It was out on East Colfax. Okay, so I'm going to tell you an East Colfax story because that's where it was. It was just east of Colorado Boulevard by about 3 blocks. And then it turned into a Blockbuster Video. Now it's a little kids' swim school. But the building is still there. It's just been remodified many, many times. But the owner had all his cocktail waitresses wearing these baby doll lingerie. That's why this is my favorite tiki bar ever. And it happened to be right here in Denver. I know you're all looking at that tiki, right? Right, the Papua New Guinea bird. And then, yeah, oh, there's a woman there too. Yeah, the Tiki Kai in her baby doll lingerie. Yeah, oh, come on, guy. Really? Really? Could you be any more obvious? Okay.
I was like, he's gonna.
You're all looking. There's tiki mugs on her platter tray, right? There's tiki lamps on the table there. No, the guy who owned this restaurant, he was a Chinese guy, and his name was Harry Chu, Chew, Harry Chu, and he owned the Tiki Kai here in Denver, and he owned the Tiki Kai in Albuquerque, and he had at both locations he had these cocktail waitresses wearing these baby doll lingerie. They got busted by Denver Vice. They came in here and they said, this is lewd and you have to change. They singled out one specific cocktail waitress and they arrested her. And Harry went down and bailed her out, but she had to go to court. And when she went to court down there at the City and County building, I read the article in the Denver Post about it, and there's a picture of her, and the judge invited her to his private chambers to demonstrate her cocktail outfit, just to see how lewd it was. Come on, sweetheart, come on back to my office and show me your thing. And she was slapped with $100 fine and let go, but she had to model it for the judge, not in the courtroom, but back in his private chambers. So fill in the blank, wherever you want to go with that. Let's stay on Colfax. This is still East Colfax. This is just a couple blocks north of the Capitol. This was the Hardo Denver Hotel with Tiki Bar. What an exotic name. It was just called the Tiki Bar. But the Tiki Lounge there, with its very politically incorrect graphics of the day, right? But the Polynesian cocktails in 1960, you could find it right there. And it was designed by a very well-established Tiki bar designer named of Eli Headley, who designed Adventureland for Disneyland for Walt Disney. So he was very well respected. He designed the Tiki Bar here in Denver, and he also designed a Tiki Bar at the Ramada in Pueblo. Trader Vic's. Did anybody ever go to Trader Vic's here in Denver? At the Cosmopolitan Hotel or at the Hilton or both? At the Cosmo?
Cosmo.
Here it is when it was at the Cosmo. When Trader Vic's first came to town, it was not called Trader Vic's.
Before that.
It was the Outrigger right there. Yep. The Outrigger restaurant. Now, people didn't know the name, the Outrigger restaurant. They were confused. They didn't know that was Trader Vic. So after a couple of years, he changed the name and changed it to Trader Vic.
Right.
But here it is on 17th, or not 17th, Broadway. This is the Brown Palace, still standing today. The United Bank building is right across the street. Here's the Cosmo right here. There's the entrance to Trader Vic's, that A-frame. So if you go into the Brown Palace today, and you go have dinner or have a cocktail in the Ship's Tavern, and if you're sitting there and you're looking out the window at the Ship's Tavern across Broadway, you would be looking directly at Trader Vic's, where it was across the street at the Cosmopolitan Hotel. That's what it looked like when it was the Outrigger. Black and white photograph. Here we are. It was the Outrigger for the first 10 years that it operated before it changed names. It was still a Trader Vic operation, but Vic renamed it. Trader Vic's comes to Denver in 1962. Made a big splash. All they did was change the signage on the restaurant and change the menus. But this was the Trader Vic's in the Cosmo. Now, when you went into the Cosmo, they had a very mod lobby, and they had their cocktail lounge was called the Gun Room. Do you remember the Gun Room? And they had all of these Wild West buffalo hunting rifles and six shooters and everything like that. You could go to the Gun Room, which had the Western mod feel, or you could come to the other side of the lobby and come into Trader Vic's. Leo Goto was the maitre d' when it first opened. Leo became a fixture in the Denver restaurant scene. He was there at Trader Vic's for many years, and then he left and he opened his own restaurant downtown called Leo's Place. Leo's Place was at the end of the 16th Street Mall when it was knocked down and torn down, and when the 16th Street Mall wanted to come in and do that at the Capitol end, not at the Lodo side, but all the way up at the other end. That's where Leo's Place was. When Leo's Place came down, he went and opened another restaurant and managed that, and that was the Welsher Inn. And so Leo was involved with Trader Vic's, Leo's Place, and then the Welsher Inn. That was his repertoire. And Leo just passed away just a couple of years ago. But he was a real institution in the Denver restaurant scene. Now, when Hilton came into town and built the brand new Denver Hilton, this is off of Court. This is 16th Street Mall before it became a pedestrian mall. There's the state capitol in the background, but the big building there was the Denver Hilton. And when it came in 1978, Trader Vic's moved. So they moved out of the Cosmopolitan Hotel, which was a 100-year hotel, and they moved into the brand new big shiny Hilton across the way. And so they opened their version in the Hilton. But when they left the location in the Cosmopolitan, They walked out of the door and they left everything hanging on the wall. The ovens were there. Don the Beachcomber came in and took over the space. They took Trader Vic's name off, put Don the Beachcomber, and it became an instant tiki bar. Just add water. That's all they did was change the sign. That location in the Cosmopolitan Hotel was a Trader Vic's, or was a Trader Vic's first, Outrigger, then Trader Vic's, then Don the Beachcomber. Amazing.
So where was this one located in the Hilton Hotel?
It was on the, it's closest to the City and County building over on the west side on the second floor. Yeah. That part of the lobby's been remodeled. You can't
So
find
Alan, do you remember this in there?
Yeah, 'cause
No,
Alan
it was
worked on
there.
that.
Alan worked on that building, Mike, in case
Oh, okay.
he works with
On the Hilton building? I told this,
You have a storkitect in front of you right now.
I had somebody tell me a story one time about this. The City and County building is across the street, and he was in
The Web building is across the street.
the what?
The Web building
The Web building, yes.
is across the street.
And he was an accountant for
County
this
building is
right, the Web building, the Web building, and he was an accountant for the City and County of Denver. And he would sit in his office with a pair of binoculars, and he was a little pervert because he would look at the Hilton across the street, and he said, "I've got stories to tell you." And I said, "Tell me later. You know, I want to hear them all." But so Trader Vic's existed in 2 locations in Denver, in the Cosmopolitan Hotel and the Hilton Hotel. So here was the Cosmo location when Don the Beachcomber came in right behind him, and they said, now. Trader Vic's didn't last in the Hilton very long. They got up and moved out. What do you think happened? Don Beachcomber did it again. The Cosmopolitan got imploded. They moved out of the Cosmo and they moved straight back into a second time. A location in Denver be transformed from Trader Vic's to Don the Beachcomber. So in Denver, we had 2 Trader Vic's locations and 2 Don the Beachcomber locations. It's amazing. Our best tiki restaurant was this man right here. This is Tommy Wong.
Yep.
And the Yum Yum Tree. Remember the Yum Yum Tree on Colorado Boulevard?
right across the street from my house.
By your house? Over there by Celebrity Sports Center, right? It was the first concept of a food court. Tommy ran, here he is right here, here's his store. He ran Tommy Wong's.
Yep.
The Chinese element of the Yum Yum Tree. Years ago, 20 years ago, I decided I wanted to see if I could find Tommy Wong if he was still alive in Denver. So I pulled out the phone book at that time, right? And just started looking through Wong. Wong, and there's a bunch of them. T. Wong. And I got it down to maybe 18 T. Wongs. I started just driving by their houses. And I drove over to one. It was over near Heather Gardens. And I drove up to this house, T. Wong with an address. I drove up to the house, and the front yard was full of tikis. I was like, that's him. Tommy. I know it's Tommy. So I made a note, and I came back maybe a week later with some gear, with a tiki book. And I knocked on his door, and he answered. And I said, hello, Mr. Wong. My name's Mike Skinner. And did you operate Tommy Wong's Island Restaurant in Glendale? And he's like, yeah. Who are you? What do
It
you?
wasn't in Glendale, it was in Denver.
Well, it was right behind Shotgun Willie's. Right.
No. Shotgun Willie's was across the street.
Well, yeah, it was down the
Other
block
side
a
of
little.
Colorado Boulevard.
Okay. Well, when I ran into Tommy, he invited me into his house. And I sat there and talked to him for probably 2 hours. And he ran into his back bedroom. He came out with a big box of menus and photographs and all this. And he gave it all to me. He said, I'm amazed that anybody even remembers that I operated this restaurant 40 years ago. And I said, oh, yeah, it's not just me, but there's a lot of people. And I said, so I'm not just going to keep this stuff and put it in a book or in a box and put it in the closet. I said, we'll share all this stuff. So Tommy was very appreciative of that. Fast forward 5 or 6 or 7 years after that, I invited Tommy to my home tiki bar. And his daughter brought him. And we did a whole show just like we're doing now on Tommy. Because he worked at Don the Beachcomber in Chicago. Then he worked in the Aku Aku in Las Vegas. He has a long pedigree of all these tiki restaurants. It was the longest show of my life. Because every slide that came up, Tommy would stop and tell a story. And we recorded, and he would say...
You recorded it?
Yeah, we recorded the whole thing. And he would tell a story about, oh, this waiter, I remember this guy. And he would, it took, I probably had 40 slides or 50 slides. 2.5 hours later, we're still going. And Tommy's just, he was amazed that anybody remembered or cared about this. And when they got up to leave, his daughter came over to me and she said, thank you for doing this. My dad had no idea that, anybody cared about this stuff. And thank you for sharing this and highlighting his career, and it made him feel special. So it was really a beautiful place in Denver. This is one of the pictures that Tommy gave me. But it had several different elevated dining rooms. You'll notice on the back wall there, you've got the simulated rock wall with waterfalls, and you can see the lagoon in the front there. So you went around for the different dining rooms that were out over the water. They had a floor show that did nightly presentations. What happened to Tiki? This was going gangbusters. It was everywhere, from Walt Disney to Florida to Tiki Gardens to music. Vietnam happens. And all of a sudden, the world of exotic primitivism isn't so sexy anymore. When you're seeing Waltah Clarke on the news every night showing pictures like this. Tiki very quickly became not so sexy anymore. And people really tried to distance themselves from it when you had this happening in the nightly news. And so here are Tiki Gardens up for auction when they closed, and they auctioned everything and put it for sale. But I don't want to end on a downer. I want to end on an upbeat. So the world's greatest Polynesian restaurant still exists. It's called the Maikai, and it's in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It opened in 1956. It closed during COVID, and it hasn't reopened yet. During COVID, it had a massive roof failure that wiped out the kitchen, and they're going through a $15 million renovation as a historic property. And you all know in this ring what that involves.
Irma, I believe, was the one that took that.
Yeah, so they're going through a massive, massive renovation. It wiped out the kitchen, not the interior part of the restaurant. So all the decor, everything that we love about the Maikai didn't get touched. Luckily, it was the kitchen, which is replaceable. I'm bringing it back up to code. So the Maikai is still there. It still exists. It's not open yet. They're hoping to have it open by this summer. So it'll be 3 years, 3 full years. We heard that a few years, but at some point they do have to.
This is our theoretical wedding venue, by the way. We've been waiting on this to reopen.
Yeah, so that's the inside of the Maikai. They have a floor show there. Before COVID, it was the longest running floor show in America, more than any of the floor shows in Hawaii. But it was they had tropical lagoons out in the back. At one point, they were going to have pearl divers. Going into there, you could pay for a pearl diver to go in there. So I said there were 3 Tiki temples, remember? The Kahiki is gone. The second one was called the Mauna Loa. It was in downtown Detroit. It was open for 10 months. What happened in Detroit in the 60s? You had the civil riots, and it devastated downtown Detroit. Mauna Loa opened 10 months before the riots, and it never was able to come back. So they sunk all of this massive amount of money into it. Didn't even make it a year, and it didn't make it. The third Tiki temple is the Maikai, and so
there's also the Kowloon.
The cow is getting ready to close.
No, they keep saying that, but
Okay.
they say it's still open.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So if you're looking for a Tiki fix, you got to go east, you got to go west. Go west to Disneyland, go visit Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, or go east to Fort Lauderdale maybe a year from now when the Maikai gets up and running again. But you can still, this is the Molokai Bar and the Molokai Maidens. So their bar is nautical themed, the restaurant is Polynesian themed, but it's the world's greatest Polynesian restaurant. With that, I want to say thank you, Josh, for having me. And so I hope I whet your appetite for the world of Tiki, and enjoy Tiki season. It's about here. Our summer is what we refer to as Tiki season. So any questions or comments?
If you do want to see a bar that's still similar to 1956, you can also go to the Tonga Hut in West Hollywood, and that is still, it's very small. However, it still is very original.
Yeah.
What? There's In San Francisco, in the basement,
The Fairmount.
the Fairmount. Who owns? Is that in
The
private?
Tonga room.
That's a Tonga room also. Yeah, the one.
The drinks are not good, but the experience is pretty good.
Okay.
Thank you. What tiki bars have you guys visited?
We just went to the Tiki Tea last week.
In Hollywood.
Yeah.
Okay. Tiny, right?
Very tiny.
Did you have a
Raised mistake.
raised mistake or a toro toro?
The Toro Toro was a lot of fun. They had a little
Yep.
white out buffaloes that runs down the counter.
Well, thank you, Josh. Thank you. Question. Yes.
Yeah, you touched on this a little bit, but as these things shut down, some of the stuff got sold off. The rest of it is just landfill, or
Goes in the dumpster. Yeah. So there was a tiki bar in Pueblo. It was called Aloha Glorias, and I found it in 1989. That's how I've been watching that tiki bar since 1989. Every time I'm in Pueblo, I do a lot of travel around the state for my job, and every time I'm in Pueblo, I would drive by it and I'd take pictures of the tiki. And they changed over the decades. They changed colors. They'd get repainted, and then 6 months ago, I drove by there and they were gone. I've been watching those tikis for 30 years, and I drive by there one time and they're just gone. And there's nobody to talk to. There's nobody to ask. It's just like, okay, well, I kind of watched them. I would have liberated them and brought them home, but I didn't. And so there's the motto in the tiki world is that you only save a tiki if it's in danger, immediate danger of being, ending up in the dumpster. Just because it looks cool and you think it might go out of business someday, that's taboo. You don't liberate it at that time. So I left them and watched them for 30 years, but they're gone. So most of that stuff just ends up in the dumpster. Yeah.
Although you told me, I think Scott and I have the tikis from Steve that we think came from the Denver Trader Vic's. So we have a pair that we think were Oceanic Arts that came from the Trader Vic's. So they're very weathered, but we do have remnants of Denver tiki. And I ended up with an Armand Davis George Nakashima designed ore from the
Now someday,
years ago, but
if you keep your eyes open on Facebook or in this world, I've done, Josh, you read off several different shows I've done about the crossover between cowboys and tikis. That was huge, right? Turn on the TV in 1950, what was it? Western, tiki, Western. Huge crossover. I've done shows about tiki. I've done shows about other. My favorite show, and Monty and I were talking about over a cocktail before we started, is a show called Tiki After Dark. It's not appropriate to do here because it's adult themed. Very adult themed. Yeah, so someday, somewhere, if you see something in Denver about the Tiki After Dark event, that's me. And it's you've got prepare to be shocked because it's about the erotic side of tiki, right? Tiki has this embedded sexual energy in it. Tikis are erotic. They're a phallic symbol. And so there's all this repressed sexualism in the 50s and the 60s, and we talk about it. We talk about it a lot. It's a lot of fun.
join us in the Denver Tiki Tribe if you
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Josh. Thank you.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, can I hear a motion to adjourn? A second. All in favor, say aye. Oh, and when do we have to do that?
Well, notice I'm looking out the window. I don't see